Child star syndrome is a phenomenon that we're seeing all too much of in the 21st century. When children are pushed into the limelight at a young age, it often has catastrophic effects on them as they grow up. Some of them suffer terrible abuse from adults within the industry. Some develop severe mental health issues, which they commonly treat with excessive drugs and alcohol, often leading to dependency and sometimes even death. We've seen it with the likes of Lindsay Lohan, Macaulay Culkin, Amanda Bynes, and the subject of today's video, Ryan Grantham, who starred in some family favourites, including Riverdale, Supernatural, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But this video isn't about Ryan's achievements. Actually, this video is about what happened when those achievements stopped and Ryan began spiralling into madness. And now, Ryan is known not for his acting work, but for being a cold-blooded murderer. Before we get into the case, I just want to thank our sponsor for making this video possible, Casetify. For years and years, I have been saying that Casetify make the best phone cases around, and I still stand by that. You want to know why? Because I am such a liability with my phone. I'm always throwing it about on nights out. I drop it every 2 minutes. And that's because I know that I can. Because I've been wearing Casetify phone cases on my phone for years now, and it's never once cracked, smashed, chipped, scratched, anything. That, like, my phone has been immaculately preserved for years. All of their cases are military grade drop protected, some of them from even up to 11.5 feet in the air, which is insane. They have so many styles and designs to choose from, whether you want something simple, sleek, or if you want like a cute design or like a funny design. Or you can customize a phone case on there, which is so fun. You can have anything on there from your own name or your initials, which I have had before. Love those because you always know which phone is yours. You could get anything on there, someone else's name or like a phrase that you like. You could make your own merch. I mean, I literally have one with my boyfriend's name on. I always think it would be a really cute gift for someone if you put like an inside joke on there or something for like your best friend. Hint, if any of my friends are watching this. And I love matching my phone cases to my outfits as well. My outfit to go and see the Barbie movie had like hot pink in it, so you know I had to match my phone case. And the phone case that I used to go see the Barbie movie, I've swapped it out for boyfriend case now. But I love this. This is by one of my favourite artists. Casetify do a bunch of collaborations with artists, and I've had so many cases from this collection. And Casetify also very much care about the planet, which is one of my favourite things about them. All their cases are made from 65% recycled and plant-based materials. They're always looking to recycle cases that are already in the world, you know, like old unused ones that don't fit people's phones anymore. They're always looking to make them into something useful, a new phone case. So if you want to treat yourself to a cute new phone case or maybe customize one, put your own boyfriend's name on it, then you can head to casetify.com/Eleanor and you'll get 15% off automatically applied at checkout when you go through that link. So thanks again to Casetify for sponsoring this video. One last thing before we get into the case, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This video is for educational purposes, and everything that I'm about to say is just publicly available information that myself and my team have found and have compiled into one big video. This video will cover especially sensitive topics, including but not limited to cancer, depression, suicidal ideation, psychosis, and drug and alcohol abuse. If you feel like these topics might be triggering or too intense for you, then I would recommend that you click out of the video now. Hopefully I'll get a chance to see you another time with a different video, but until then, look after yourself. While we make every effort to fact check our sources and make sure that all of the information in this video is correct, no action should be taken in reliance upon the information in this video. And I want to take this opportunity to remind you all that these are real people's lives that we're talking about, so I urge you to keep the comment section respectful, kind. All opinions in this video are mine and mine alone, and with that being said, let's get into the case. So today's case takes place in Vancouver, Canada in 2020, right as the pandemic hit. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's introduce our child star, Ryan Grantham. Born on November 30th, 1998, to his doting mother, Barbara Waite, Ryan was absolutely treasured by his family, as was his sister Lisa. When the kids were still very young, their father walked out, pretty much abandoned them, and left Barbara to be a single mother to these two children. But she did the absolute best that she could, and she loved watching her children grow up. She loved being a mum. At some point during the children's early years, Barbara was diagnosed with cancer, which she was then battling for the rest of her life. It was terrifying. It was a challenge. But for those that knew Barbara, they said that it never changed her. Barbara had always been described as relentlessly positive, which I love. She had just a real lust for life. She seemed to be a very energetic, very fun-loving person. She was especially outdoorsy. She liked biking, hiking, skiing. She would spend as much time out in nature and taking her children out in nature as she possibly could. Especially as she got older, she was still very, very active. But finding time to pursue her hobbies like biking and hiking, it was quite hard for her, because between battling literal cancer, having two children, being a single mother, also having a job to provide for her kids, on top of all of that, she was also caring for her own elderly mother. Barbara was a superhero, truly, and she always tried to be the absolute best, most supportive mother that she could. And so when Ryan was becoming like a preteen, he started showing interest in acting, because in Vancouver, acting is quite a common hobby for children, because Vancouver, don't know if you guys knew this, I learnt this while researching this video, Vancouver is the second biggest place for like TV and movie production, just before Hollywood. I didn't realise so much was going on in Vancouver. But yeah, Ryan showed an interest in acting, and so his mother supported him in that. She took him to any and all auditions that he could get his hands on. And sometimes they would be driving for hours. I mean, they didn't exactly live in Vancouver. They lived just outside of Vancouver, and everything was going on inside Vancouver. So they would drive like hours to and from these auditions. She would put aside a lot of her own spare time to help make her son's dreams work. Ryan got his first role actually at 9 years old in the 2007 movie called The Secret of the Nutcracker. It was like a made-for-TV cheesy Christmas movie. It wasn't exactly a blockbuster, but for a 9-year-old, it was a pretty good, like, foot in the door role to get. Especially because Ryan Grantham looked younger than he actually was, which is actually really good for child actors, because it's a lot easier for directors to direct a 9-year-old that looks 6 rather than hire an actual 6-year-old to try and learn lines and take directions. Ryan was always very short. He was 5'2" at the time of this case, when he was like 21 years old. So this first role in the Christmas film, I'm not gonna say it put him on the map, because it didn't really. But in terms of child acting roles, supporting child acting roles for like people that look young, I don't know, it got his name out there to other casting directors. Like I say, it was a decent enough foot in the door. Over his acting career span, I think he was doing it for about 12 years, Ryan managed to rack up over 30 different roles, which is quite impressive. Although a lot of these roles would be like just one-off episodes in different TV shows, he would just be like a guest character or whatever. But as he got older, the roles got a little bit more interesting. Some of these you might have actually seen him in. He was in Supernatural, he was in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, he was in Marley and Me, The Puppy Years, and most recently, and most famously, he was in an episode of Riverdale in 2019. And even though he was only in one episode of Riverdale, it was a very important episode, because so his character was called Jeffrey, and the storyline was that his dad had killed Archie's dad. And for those of you that don't know, Archie's dad in the show was played by an actor named Luke Perry, who passed away of a stroke in real life in the middle of filming Riverdale. And so the writers had to come up with a way to write out his death in a natural and believable way. So even though Ryan was only in this one episode of Riverdale, it was a very important episode that everyone's eyes were on. Everyone wanted to see how Luke Perry's character was going to be written out of the show. And yeah, Ryan's character had a very big part in that storyline. I guess he hoped that being in Riverdale might propel his career forward, you know, get him into that Netflix casting pool, but it didn't. His career kind of stalled a little bit after this, in part due to the pandemic, but also in part he just couldn't find a role. I know that 30-something roles does sound very impressive, but over the space of like 12 years, that's not that much. I mean, it's way more than I've ever had, but I don't mean this in a rude way, but he was still only getting these like small supporting actor roles, even at the age of 21. It doesn't look like his career was progressing very quickly. And yeah, his roles were a little bit few and far between. And Ryan was just having a generally kind of hard time at this point in his life anyway. I think a lot of people do in their late teens, early 20s. He was diagnosed with depression and I think anxiety as well. I don't believe he was put on any kind of medication for his depression or anxiety. Instead, he decided to self-medicate with alcohol and marijuana. He was going to university, but like he wasn't at the same time. He was enrolled in university, but he would very rarely go due to depression and anxiety. Well, that was part of his excuse, but people that knew him said that the weed and alcohol was more of a reason why he wasn't showing up at university. He would just be stoned all the damn time. He stopped showing up to his classes, his grades were slipping, and he just spent all of his time in his room at home, just on his computer. He wasn't really going out and being social. In fact, the only times he really left his bedroom was to go get more alcohol and more weed. And it's around this time that he ended up dropping out of university. It's believed that his heavy use of these two substances, well, abuse of these two substances, might have sent him into psychosis, where he was starting to have suicidal thoughts and even homicidal thoughts. He started keeping a journal where he would get out all of these dark, disturbing thoughts that he was having, whether it was about harming himself, harming others, harming the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That was, for some reason, something that he wrote about a lot. Apparently there were parts of this journal where he was talking about becoming a mass murderer or a serial killer. I annoyingly couldn't find any like exact quotes from his own journals. It's all just kind of paraphrased in the sources that we found, so I really wonder what he was saying about becoming a mass murderer or a serial killer. But what is clear is that Ryan Grantham was having some seriously delusional and dangerous thoughts around this point in time, and I don't think anyone knew. He certainly didn't tell his mother. He loved his mother to pieces and never wanted to worry her or inconvenience her. So his mother certainly didn't know. I don't know if he had any friends that knew or anyone online that knew, because I know he spent a lot of time online. But I don't know, I think most of it was concentrated in his own head and in that journal. I don't think this side of him was really leaking out much into the outside world. Ryan had never acted on any of the things that he wrote about. He wasn't a violent person, he wasn't a criminal, he'd never committed any crimes, even like petty crimes. He'd never attempted anything before, be it suicide, homicide, anything. He had never hurt anyone before. That was until March 31st, 2020. Ryan had completely given up on university. At this point, I believe he dropped out. It's unclear whether he dropped out or whether he was kicked out, but he wasn't going to university anymore. His mental health was now at an all-time low. He would just stay at home and drink and smoke weed 24/7, which is not good for brain function. He'd been suppressing these homicidal urges that had been building up inside him for quite some time, but it was, for some reason, in March 2020, something inside him snapped, and Ryan Grantham decided that it was time to commit murder. But he wasn't going to kill just anyone. Ryan had a specific target in mind. He was going to aim big and attempt to assassinate Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I think the main reason for this being, it wasn't like he had like a specific hatred of Justin Trudeau or anything. I think the reason for this was that he wanted to make a big impact. If he was going to kill someone, he might as well kill the most powerful and important person in Canada. And Ryan knew that a crime this big would have serious repercussions. Obviously for himself, he knew that, but also for the people around him. Even if he was killed by the police at the scene or thrown in prison for the rest of his life, he knew that the people that he left behind, his family mainly, were gonna be suffering because of his actions forever. They were always going to be the family of the assassin. And he didn't want that for them. He didn't want that for his mother, who he claimed to love dearly. He loved her more than anything. And he didn't want her to live on knowing that her son was a murderer and have to deal with the consequences of raising a murderer. He just knew that her finding this out would just completely crush her. And he didn't want her to find out. So on that day, March 31st, by this point the pandemic had well and truly hit. Most people were locked inside their houses with their families, and that included Ryan and Barbara. He knew that today was the day he was going to act. I believe from when he woke up, he knew that today was the day. He spent most of the first half of the day just sitting at their kitchen table, loading and unloading his rifle. Almost like a nervous fidget, you know how like, I don't know, I bounce my leg whenever I'm anxious. I imagine it was kind of like that. And his mum knew that he had this gun. He was known to like collect and play with rifles. So it wasn't unusual to see him playing with a rifle at the kitchen table. He eventually set the gun down, I think it was unloaded at this point, and just left it on the table and went outside of their house and just sat on their front stairs for about 15 minutes, just in silence, just thinking about what he was about to do. Then, when he stood up 15 minutes later, he went back inside the house, picked up his gun again, and that was when he heard his mother playing the piano in the living room. He loaded the gun one last time and then followed the sound of the music until he was standing in the doorway of their living room watching his mother play the piano. And this was a tune that she'd played often. She was a really good piano player. She loved to just sit there and go away with the music. Ryan stood and watched her for a moment, and then he lifted the rifle, lined up the crosshairs with the back of her head, and then with a deep breath, he pulled the trigger. And he murdered his mother in the house that they shared together. Barbara Waite was 64 years old when she died from that one gunshot wound to the head. She'd done nothing but love and support both of her children all her life. And that's exactly why Ryan felt like he had to kill her, because he knew that he had turned bad and he didn't want his mother to be alive to see just how bad he was about to turn. After fatally shooting his mother, Ryan Grantham then pulls out a GoPro camera and starts to film a vlog, like a confession almost. He even showed his mother's body laying slumped against the piano, blood everywhere. In the video, he said, "I shot her in the back of the head. In the moments after, she would have known it was me." From what Ryan says there, it seems as though he believes that Barbara didn't die instantly. There must have been some time between the gun discharging and her actually seeming dead for him to think that there was a window of time where she got shot and then realized it was her son that was the one that did it. Which, if that's true, that is so heartbreaking to know in your final seconds that it was your son that did this to you. But also, I don't quite know if that will have been the case. Because like I said, Ryan was not a violent person. His mother loved him dearly and he loved his mother dearly. This all seemed to come out of nowhere as soon as Ryan started suffering with psychosis. So really, in that moment, when she was shot in the back of the head, would she have assumed it was her son? She had her back to him. She didn't see anything. And of course, I don't want to insert myself into this story, but I was just thinking as I was researching this, that if that was me, my brain probably wouldn't have gone to, my only son has betrayed me. My brain would probably go to, we've been broken into, there's an intruder that has shot me, and they might also get my son. Of course, no one knows what Barbara was thinking in that moment, if she was thinking anything, if there was any time for her to have even thought anything. Ryan shut off the GoPro camera and spent the rest of the day just in the house with his mother's dead body, laying slumped there at the piano. He didn't move her. He just got severely drunk and high, and in between watching Netflix, he spent the next 24 hours planning his next moves. One of the first things he did was see to his mother's body, but like I say, he didn't move her at all. He just went and grabbed a white sheet and draped it over her and the piano, and then he went and got a bunch of candles and sat them all on the piano around her and lit them all, almost as if it was like some sort of shrine, like a place of rest. He even placed some rosary beads in front of her on the piano, and I find it very interesting and very disturbing how much respect he seems to have for her after just killing her. That night, Ryan Grantham wrote his final journal entry that read, "I'm so sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I hate myself. There's a lot of media of me out there, film and TV, hundreds of hours of me that can be viewed and dissected. No one will understand." He then spent the rest of his evening making a bunch of Molotov cocktails, which is essentially like a flammable handmade bomb type thing. Nah, that's not a good way to describe it. Anyway, so a Molotov cocktail is a glass bottle with a flammable liquid in it, usually like petrol, gasoline, and then in the top it has like a wick or a rope or like some piece of cloth that you can light, and then someone throws the bottle, and then when it smashes and hits the ground, all of that flammable liquid gets lit by the wick. Molotov cocktail. I don't know what his intentions were specifically with these Molotov cocktails. He made 12 of them. That's a damn lot. I don't know whether he was planning, I don't know what he was planning to do with them. He then set about packing up the family car to embark on the next leg of his journey. The journey to kill the Prime Minister. He loaded in 3 guns, 12 Molotov cocktails that he made the night before, a bunch of camping supplies, and enough ammo to trigger a small war, apparently. He knew exactly where to go to find Justin Trudeau, his next victim. It was public knowledge that he and all of his family lived in Prideaux Cottage in Ottawa. Now, if you're familiar with Canadian geography, you might have already spotted that Ottawa is on the complete other side of the country to Ryan, who was in Vancouver. 4,500 kilometers between him and Justin Trudeau. 3,000 miles. That would be a 50-hour drive. Over 2 days of driving, but I don't know, Ryan had planned it. He decided that he was up for it, and so he was on his way. He drove for a good few hours, over 100 miles, but it was at this point where he started to get some doubts about the whole thing, about his whole plan. I guess he was just now realizing how long this drive was, and he had a lot of time alone with his thoughts, and I don't know, he seemed to be coming to his senses in a way that killing the Prime Minister is not possible. He has a bunch of security. It's 50 hours away in the car. All of this was kind of coming to him at this point, and he realized it wasn't a feasible plan. So now Ryan has decided that killing Justin Trudeau is out of the question, but he is still in this frame of mind where he still wants to do something. He still wants to cause destruction and harm in some way, so he starts to come up with some other plans. He thought that he could drive to the Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver, which has like the metal structure above it, and he thought he could drive there, park up his car on the bridge, and then climb the metal structure with all of his weapons on him somehow, 12 Molotov cocktails, a gun, a bunch of ammo. He was going to climb up this metal structure, station himself, and then just start killing the people below, throwing these Molotov cocktails, and then shooting any survivors of the bombs. But after a good amount of time of thinking that plan through, for some reason he decided to not go through with that either, and so he reverted to plan C now, which was to go and shoot up his university. Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. Ryan obviously held a lot of resentment for his uni. I don't know if they kicked him out, I don't know if he left, But he was certainly getting into a lot of trouble while he was enrolled there for not showing up to his classes. His professors will have been getting on at him. And yeah, university to him was just a very negative feeling in his life. And so he decided that that was his next plan of attack. So he swung the car around and started making that 100-mile journey all the way back to Vancouver. But on the way there, Ryan Grantham did something unexpected. He pulled into a local police station, and he just parked his car in the car park for a while. He was just sitting there, thinking, contemplating, in a police station car park. He was weighing up his options right now, which he saw as either continue killing, go out and commit a mass murder, do what the original plan was, wherever he ends up, and cause destruction. That was what he set out to do that day. Or he now had another option in his mind. He could just kill himself, and then all of this would be over. Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the murder that he had already committed of his loving mother, Barbara, who had done nothing but love and adore him all his life. The reason he had killed her was because he planned to go on and kill more people, and he didn't want his mother to see that. But now, it seems that he was chickening out on the rest of the plan. He had already killed his mother, for no reason now. His old logic no longer held up, so now he felt as though he had murdered his wonderful, beautiful mother for no reason. And he was so angry at himself. He felt he had made a grave mistake, the worst mistake he had ever made in his entire life. He said that he had this one thought just repeating in his head over and over again: I took from the world a beautiful life, so I owe the world a life. He felt he deserved to die because he had killed his mother, and he got quite close to it. He was even lifting the gun to his head. He was really considering going through with it. But it was around this time that he spotted a police officer walking across the car park. And it seemed that in that moment, Ryan's decision was made for him. He put the gun down, got out of his car, walked up to this officer and just said, I killed my mother. Apparently, his delivery of these 4 words to this police officer was just very blank. Very cold, very matter of fact. He wasn't crying, there was no remorse. It didn't seem like there was any major regret there. Some people think that that's because there was no remorse or regret in him whatsoever. But I think it could have also been down to the fact that he'd already kind of emotionally processed everything while he was sat in that car. Not completely, but he'd already been so angry at himself and so upset at himself for killing his mother that now he felt he had to be cold to deal with the reality of his actions. And in the face of the police, he had to be more put together. So Vancouver police took Ryan Grantham into the station. But as all of this was going on, Ryan's sister Lisa was on her way to her mother's house to go and check on her. She hadn't heard from her all day, and usually they were in contact every single day, especially during the pandemic. And knowing that her mother was sick and struggling with her cancer, she decided to just go straight to the house to go and make sure that she was okay. When she arrived, Lisa let herself into the house using her own key, and there she was the one to discover her own mother's murder scene. What she saw when she walked into the living room was this big white sheet draped over the piano and clearly draped over something else on the piano seat, and she immediately knew what that was. There was a big patch of blood on the white sheet. There were candles scattered around on the piano, still lit, but pretty much melted down to nothing. Lisa was horrified at the sight of this. She called for the police, who came down and they took the sheet off, and they discovered that this was her mother, Barbara. And it was at this point that Lisa said, well, I've got a brother too. My little brother Ryan also lives here, and he wasn't in the house. He was nowhere to be seen. And once police found out that fact, that this mother had been found murdered, but surrounded with candles and rosary beads, and her own son is missing, they kind of already knew what must have happened here. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't, like a sexually motivated murder, anything like that. Whoever had murdered her had felt bad about it, it seemed. It was clear that whoever did kill her wanted to show some level of respect in the aftermath of it, and that's why they'd covered her body. That's why they'd, placed rosary beads by her. It's all just a weirdly tender way to dress and to leave a murder victim. And so that told police that it must have been her son. It must have been her missing son. There were a bunch of other things that also pointed to this. I mean, there were no signs of forced entry in the house. Ryan Grantham was known to collect guns. He loved guns. And he was the only other person living in that house with her. So police started to search the crime scene, the house in general, specifically Ryan's bedroom, and there they found the journal and the GoPro. We've already talked about a bunch of the incriminating evidence on those two things, but there are a couple more things that police came to discover. On that GoPro memory card, there wasn't just his confession vlog that he filmed and then filmed his mother's dead body. There were actually a few more clips before that seemed to kind of show the same thing. A few clips of Ryan walking with the GoPro and his rifle, walking the route of the house to the living room door. And then the clips would end. Police theorized that this was Ryan practicing, doing practice runs of his mother's murder, making sure that he could get through the house quietly with his gun and things like that. I couldn't find when these other clips were filmed. I don't know if they were filmed maybe that same morning when he woke up and he decided today was the day. He did a few practice runs before going through with it. Or, and annoyingly, I couldn't find when they were done, because what if they were done like a month beforehand or in the weeks running up to it? I mean, that really shows a different level of premeditation. Either way, it shows premeditation, but could you imagine if those clips had been from a significant amount of time before? The police that responded to the crime scene sent out a bunch of alerts for Ryan Grantham, not knowing that he had actually already given himself up to Vancouver police. He was already in police custody. At this point, he was actually already being interviewed by the police, and because he'd given himself up, he was just confessing everything. Every detail of everything that he'd done. He had no reason to hold anything back at this point. He confessed that he had killed his mother that day because he felt like a huge disappointment to her in so many different ways. He was dependent on a bunch of substances to the point where he'd gotten himself kicked out or dropped out of university, ruined his education. He knew that his university failure had really upset his mum, and it really upset him to know that he'd upset her. But of course, we know that wasn't the only reason he wanted to kill Barbara. Now he had to admit to the police his greater plan for that day, which was that he was actually planning to assassinate the Prime Minister. And that was why he felt he had to kill his mother, because he didn't want his mother to be alive when her son became a murderer, an assassin. He just thought it would be better to put her out of her misery before that even happened, before she was even in misery. That was how he personally justified murdering his mother, and it makes sense given the way that her body was left. He said that he wanted to do something for her because he robbed her of everything. On a search of Ryan's laptop, they got a little insight into what he would do online. You know, when he'd lock himself in his bedroom drunk and high, he was more often than not on the dark web. Not just the regular web that me and you go on. He was on the dark web watching graphic, violent videos. And I couldn't find exactly what that meant. That was the only way that these sources would refer to what he watched. So maybe it's for the best. I don't know how graphic or violent these videos were, or in what way. That even freaks me out. We don't know what kind of graphic, you know. Just imagining what Ryan Grantham's life looked like in the last few months of freedom that he had. He was just always locked in this bedroom in a world of such dark and disturbing content. Like, he was watching all these things on the dark web, don't know what they were, but when he wasn't watching those, he was writing in his diary about how he wants to be a serial killer or kill Justin Trudeau or kill himself. Like, his whole world was just darkness. He was intoxicated all the time. He felt like he had no prospects in life because he'd just dropped out of university and the acting roles were drying up, especially because of the pandemic. And on top of that, he was falling deeper and deeper into psychosis. After his confession, of course, Ryan was not allowed out on bail. He was kept in police custody, and they brought in a couple of psychiatrists to evaluate him. A couple as well, because they wanted multiple opinions on this. Both of them came to the same conclusion, that Ryan was suffering with a substance abuse disorder and a mood disorder, which I couldn't find for the life of me what that mood disorder was. I presume it was depression or some very severe form of depression. Ryan's mental state was described by these professionals as unstable and fragile. It was also noted by them that Ryan's attempt to self-medicate his mental illnesses or mental problems with drugs and alcohol had only made the situation even worse for him. He'd started heavily using these substances when he was still in his mid-teens, when his brain was still developing, still forming. Of course, that in itself doesn't lead anyone to become a murderer, but I think when all of these factors are combined, it certainly wouldn't have helped. When he's already in such a fragile mental state, he's depressed, he's having all these dark thoughts, consuming all this dark content, plus his brain just wasn't formed properly. His decision making was impaired, from a very early age because he hadn't allowed his actual brain to grow. It's believed that his regular viewing of dark content on the dark web had really desensitized him to violence and aggression and pain and death. It was very normalized to him in his day-to-day life since he was witnessing it every day through a screen, that is believed to have made him think, oh, I could do that. But even though both psychiatrists agreed that Ryan was very mentally unwell, they also agreed that he was still capable of making decisions. He decided to kill his mother that day. It wasn't his mental illness that made him do it. He decided to kill his mother that day. He was criminally responsible, and so the idea of the insanity plea was completely out of the window. On June 13th, 2022, after serving 2 years in police custody throughout the pandemic, obviously everything was delayed, Ryan Grantham finally pled guilty to second-degree murder. I believe it was second-degree murder. I think his defense team really tried to argue that he had shown remorse, he'd given himself up to the police before he could do anything else. I think they tried to say he was clearly in some sort of psychosis, a very dangerous mental state, but he still managed to put an end to it by taking himself to the police. And I believe that's why he was given second degree rather than first degree, which is what he probably should have got, but In the court trial, the GoPro footage of his mother's dead body was, of course, shown, and he couldn't watch it. He refused to watch it. He just sat there with his head in his hands. So, like I said, he pled guilty to second-degree murder, and in Canada, second-degree murder is an automatic life sentence, so that's what he got. The judge decided that Ryan would be eligible for parole after 14 years. Now, that decision was made, again, because he seemed to show remorse and he put a stop to it himself. He didn't try to cover anything up. All those factors led to him having quite a low parole time. Another thing that really went in his favour was that he was actively really trying to work on his mental health whilst he was in police custody for those 2 years running up to his trial. He knew that all of it was his own fault. He killed his mother. He has put all his family through such trauma, and he knew that it was all down to him and his actions and his thoughts and the way that his brain had worked. So he was really trying to fix that. And the judge on his trial really did want to believe that there could come a day when Ryan Grantham is safe and could go out in the world again. But who knows? Ryan stood up in court and gave a closing statement after he'd been sentenced. And this closing statement had some interesting quotes. I've just kind of pulled a few out and I'll read them for you. He said, "In the face of something so horrible, saying sorry seems so pointless. But from every fibre of my being, I am sorry. I cared about her more than anything in the world. My mother was a caring, compassionate, loving person. She did nothing to deserve what I did to her." In the aftermath of this case, Lily Reinhart from Riverdale, who plays Betty, actually responded to like this story when it broke on the news, because obviously Ryan is often referred to as the Riverdale killer, you know, this actor from Riverdale that killed his mum. And Lily actually publicly said, "We do not claim him, thank you." Which actually, I bet that's really scary for everyone that's ever worked with Ryan to look back on their time, like on set with him or whatever, just knowing that that level of violence and depravity is laying dormant in someone the whole time and you had no idea. Like, he was just a ticking time bomb waiting to murder his own mother and maybe the Prime Minister and maybe a bunch of other people had he not kind of snapped out of it and taken himself to the police station. Ryan Grantham is currently being held in a prison/mental health facility. It was deemed that he wouldn't be sent to like a normal prison and be lumped in with all the other men because they thought he would be a target of abuse on many different levels. As we mentioned earlier, Ryan was very short. He was 5'2". He looked young for his age. He was very like skinny framed, not very strong. They thought that he would be a prime target for all kinds of abuse, but mainly sexual abuse. If he was to be put in a prison with a bunch of older, larger, stronger men, he would have had a terrible, terrible time in there. So for his own safety, he is serving his sentence quite privately. He has like a room on his own, which I guess could be seen as a perk, but whatever. Ryan Grantham will be eligible for parole in 2036, which I'm not gonna lie, I have quite a bad feeling about this one. Like, I think he's gonna get let out. I think he's gonna be able to prove somehow that he is rehabilitated and that he's different now. But just the thought that he was such a normal kid before this happened. There were no warning signs that he was thinking these things or watching these things online or planning these things. No one knew. It literally all just blew up one day when he murdered his mother, and who's to say that's not going to happen again? Although, of course, we should be trying to rehabilitate criminals. It's just scary when it comes to the part where you need to trust them to be rehabilitated. You know, you need to trust them to make good decisions from that point on and not go back to their old ways. But I guess that's the case with every criminal. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. I really, really appreciate you clicking on it and spending some time with me today. Thanks again to Casetify for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you want to get 15% off of your purchase, just go to casetify.com/Eleanor. The link is also down below in the description, and your discount will be automatically applied at checkout. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up down below. That really helps me out. It helps the video reach more people, and I would be your best friend if you gave me a thumbs up. If you want to watch another one of my videos, there should be one on screen right now, or if you want to click the little circle with my face in, that has a little subscribe thing. You can subscribe to my channel, woo! Okay, cool. See you in the next one. Bye!